can there really be too many selfies? I think so. Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I hope you're having a good 2020. Well, we're all having a very interesting 2020, that's for sure. But as you are well aware, I'm a big fan of documentaries, especially political documentaries, and I'm excited to talk to Alexandra Pelosi, whose documentary, American Selfie, One Nation Shoots Itself, it comes out, It's out. By the time this podcast comes out, it'll be out and available to see in the all types. Where is it playing, actually, Alexandra? Showtime. Okay. Showtime. That's how you see it. If you're like me, you sign up, you watch it, you watch what you want, you get out, or you stay subscribed. We have not seen each other since your debut feature, Journeys with George, which is a brilliant documentary in 2002.
And I'm not bitter. I've only made 13 more films since then, but it's okay. I know it's hard to get on your dance card. I get it. All right.
Look, you know I'm a fan because, look, I've been watching a lot of political documentaries, and I feel like a lot of them, I wouldn't even call some of these documentaries. They're very much like one side of the issue. What I really love about what you've done with American Selfie and in your work is you have an empathy for people that maybe some might assume you don't necessarily agree with. And I really felt that came through in American Selfie, which is, I think, maybe a slightly deceptive title in the sense that it's not necessarily about selfies per se. That's sort of your gateway in, but it's a look at American culture this year. And I only have one complaint about your doc. I wish it were longer. Taking us up to the present.
I have a philosophy about documentaries. They should never be longer than an hour. Because every time I watch a documentary, at about an hour, I'm like, okay, I get it. And I love documentaries, and I watch them all. And I was looking last night at a list of all the documentaries thus far that are sort of in contention for awards this year. And there were 171. And I was thinking, how am I supposed to watch 171 documentaries? But if they were all an hour, I could commit to watching all of them. The problem is they're all too long. Every documentary is too long. So this one, I have to apologize, is over an hour, which is not my style originally. But you know what? It's America. And America deserves more than an hour, I think, especially in this year.
Well, what led to, I mean, obviously, I think I know what led to this. The gateway is sort of like, you're talking about selfies, and then it just gets to, you kind of document the year month by month, and bring us up near to the present. What I really love about the doc, and I've noticed this in your work, is, like I said earlier, you have an empathy for people that some might assume you don't necessarily agree with. I think you're not looking to, say, vilify certain groups. You're getting us to kind of look at ourselves. There's even a point at which you're showing people protesting, and you pay attention to details I don't think other documentarians do, like all of the protest signs going in the garbage, like little things like that. Can you talk about, like, what draws your eye to a subject and what makes your work so unique?
I desperately try to stay away from politics, but somehow I get dragged in, and that's what happens when you have a reality television star president.
Right.
He made everybody political. Like, it used to be that there were sort of grown-ups in the corner that used to talk about these things, and everybody else was just like home watching television. And now everywhere you go, people are talking about politics. And I'm not sure I like it. I'm not sure I think that everybody should be voting. You see these things like, the Kardashians, like, vote. Well, if you don't know anything about the subject, should you really vote? I don't know. But so I was actually the agenda, if there was one, which I never really do have an agenda. But the film I wanted to make was about social media and how it's destroying the fabric of our democracy. So I was trying to pick iconic events that were sort of, we can go to this and talk to people about how they feel about our country right now. And the whole idea was, I'm going to take the temperature of America in 2020, and I'm going to create a little artifact that future generations can look at and say, oh, that was America in 2020. And what ended up happening, obviously, we all know, spoiler alert, it didn't go so well 2020, did it, right? It was all of a sudden like lockdown, and then people were dying. People that were Black and brown were dying, and then white people were out like, reopen. And so it ended up getting more political than I like to get in my conversations. But regardless of who you're going to vote for, because I try not to get involved in that conversation, I never ask people that question. I was trying to make the point that all people, no matter what their politics are, they would all tell you that social media is destroying the fabric of America, and we're not having civil conversations because people don't yell at you in all caps in real life. In real life, people have decent adult grown-up conversations. But if you follow social media, it seems like we just hate each other and there are only two sides and everybody's just, yelling at each other. And that was what I was trying to talk about. Now I just feel like I'm rambling, so you can ask me another question if you'd like.
No, I love when you ramble. You have a lot to say, but I 100% agree with you. I believe quite seriously that we are not going to solve any problems, whether it's global climate change, economic disparity. Nothing will get solved unless we learn to speak to each other respectfully and learn how to talk to each other on the internet, which it seems the discourse has reached levels that are crazy, where there was a recent case where Chris Pratt isn't participating in some Biden event, and by him not participating, people are making assumptions about his political views and then vilifying for that, and also he's religious in his personal life. It's just ridiculous the way that the rhetoric. I mean, and also, that must put an extra burden on you. I mean, some people might know who your mom is if they pay attention to politics. I was going to ask you about even like, well, look, my last name is Gore, and when Al Gore was sort of part of the political sphere, I would check in at the airport or do whatever, and does that come up for you sometimes? I mean, it must.
I try not to. I'm just a little girl with a camera. Well, I'm not such a little girl anymore. I'm kind of an old lady with a camera now, but I try not to get into that. I don't make announcements to anybody.
Right.
So I try to, I try really hard to have adult conversations with people without inserting my own worldview, because I always say to people, what if we're wrong? What if we're wrong about everything we believe? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, I'm from San Francisco and I live in Manhattan, so I am liberal bubble. Whether, regardless of what I say, no one's ever going to believe that I'm anything but just, a San Francisco liberal. So I walk around with that, like, the scarlet L, right? So when I walk into a room, it doesn't matter what I say. People are just going to assume one thing. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about who you're going to vote for. I'm talking about what our country feels right now and what we're talking about. And I'm trying to get people to look past the obvious, my last name being a curse word in many parts of the country. I've tried really hard to say, let's see if there's anything we can agree on. And in this case, it happens to be the one thing we can all agree on, is that big tech is destroying us. They're exploiting our divisions to make themselves very wealthy. And we are the big losers because we're sitting at home getting fed this toxic feed, this noise, that not even truth. It used to be that there were these things called truth, like facts. And we could say, okay, I believe this, you believe that, we can have our opinions, but at least we all could stipulate the same set of facts. Now there's no such thing as facts anymore, because people get told that, Hillary Clinton has a pedophile ring in a pizza parlor, and people believe that. Even like grown-ups with jobs and responsibilities believe that. So there's so much misinformation out there, and these algorithms are just feeding into it because they know we just want to hate each other, because hate sells. And it's making cable news, like, no one watched cable news. The ratings were dead. And now it's like, wow, cable news is just, the ratings are through the roof. And, all those, sort of war profiteers, just as America was getting, we were all locked inside, and like, who was benefiting from that? Just these, big tech companies that were exploiting the fact that we were all just sitting at home with nothing to do but stare at our phones and read things that would make us angry and make us go online and start, hate texting each other. I don't know. It feels like, if I can sum it up in one sentence, like I hope the big takeaway from this film is like, human beings have been torn apart by these little toys that they have in their hand that they've been using to take these perfect selfies of themselves to project an illusion of how happy and perfect they were, when really we all knew on the inside you could tell, like, okay, really, sure, the sorority girls that all look so perfect and happy, we all know the truth, because this has been the most toxic and dark year. We all know nobody's feeling that good on the inside right now. So hopefully people will start to use these little toys to actually, advance the conversation. Because since you're so into film, I think it's important to mention that the documentary this year, since there are 171 contenders, the documentary for Best Oscar this year goes to Darnella Frazier, the 17-year-old girl who took her camera and filmed George Floyd's murder. That's documentary film. The rest of us are just posers. She's the real deal. She stood there and she filmed the whole thing, not knowing where it was going to go. So that's, if we could take these silly little toys in our hands and turn them into actual, turns us all into war photographers and document what we see, then I think we're all going to be, a lot better off. Now, I did you the favor of cutting out the sentence there without going into the whole thing about I was in Lafayette Square and I saw my own government shooting rubber bullets and tear gas at civilians during a peaceful protest. Never thought I'd see that in America. That's like, I could go really dark with this conversation. I was just trying to blame it all on big tech without going into this sort of making it political and saying, wow, I watched my government, shoot tear gas at me during a peaceful protest. That's dark, but I'm trying not to go political. So
Good.
You're welcome.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like your documentary would make a great sort of piece with Coded Bias, if you've seen that film.
Yeah.
And then also The Social Dilemma, which is on Netflix. Those, I feel like we're finally seeing these documentaries call out social media, the way that the most extreme views are the ones that are amplified, which would make you think that, people on the right are all crazy and people on the far left are all crazy. And then I go out my door and I go to the grocery store, I go to Trader Joe's, and I go to the bar and I hang out with people or restaurants, and everybody's nice to each other. But you would think by reading social media that the fabric of society is being ripped apart. And I think, well, maybe amongst the 2% of Americans, or maybe it's less than 2%, they're actually on Twitter, which I think is the most toxic of all the social media platforms. You would think that. So where do we go? And where do we go? I mean, where is this headed? And, we haven't even gotten to the election yet. And who knows how that's going to turn out on election night.
Okay. But here's the thing about the election night thing. Okay, so yeah, I live in a liberal bubble and all my neighbors are like, oh, we only have 2 weeks left. 2 weeks left. And I'm like, first of all, I'm more worried about what's going to happen the day after the election, because someone is going to lose. And that means that half of the population is going to be really upset with the outcome. And it doesn't matter who you vote for. You should not be happy about the fact that the other side is going to be marching in the streets. There's going to be, they do drills. That's my door. They have huge police drills for what to do, what they're preparing for what's going to happen on election day. Because if your candidate doesn't win, are you going to go, pitchforks in the streets? I don't know. I mean, I'm really concerned about that. And I don't think that there's this magic unicorn called Joe Biden that's going to fix everything. If he were to win, let's say you were in this liberal bubble and you wanted Joe Biden to win, I don't think that that's going to be any kind of solution. It's not like all our problems are going to go away on the day after the election. Right? Or in January, when a new president or the president, whoever that is sworn in. Someone has to be sworn in on the day. And it's not as if oh, there we go, everything's better now. Because all of these problems that we have, it's a big open wound. And I think the election is just going to rip the Band-Aid off, that open wound. I don't think it's going to get any better. So let's not pretend that we live in a world where it's magically all going to get better on the day of, the day after.
Yeah, I don't believe that it will, but I've even seen it in stuff I talk to a lot of my friends about Star Wars and comic books and pop culture. And even those conversations have been politicized, where if you like one Star Wars movie over another, you can't be friends with that. That's ridiculous. That is a ridiculous notion. Whatever you like, you like. You like this superhero, this. I'm looking forward to just having conversations about pop culture. I'm arguing more with friends I agree with politically than ones I don't, because the ones I feel like there's maybe and I don't know where this comes from. There's this thing where people want to be right. And I don't believe there's an absolute of being. I feel like you can have your point of view, I can have my point of view, and we can coexist. Is that just a lost idea? is that just me because I'm older and I kind of see that there's a corrosive nature to the divide?
Look at you. You're all grown up now. Look at you.
Well,
You're growing up. No, but I mean, I do think what a boring world it is if we're all going to agree. What
right.
kind of a world is it going to be if we're all just going to hang out with people we agree with? I like what J.J. Abrams said when Star Wars came out. And he's like, you cannot please. We're in an era now where there's no pleasing. You're always going to piss off half the audience and say, that's not how it should have gone. So doesn't matter what you do, who you are, how successful you are or aren't, no matter who you are, you're going to be upsetting people with the decisions you make in your life. Even if you're just like, working down to the local grocery store, you're going to become, a target for, I don't know. It feels like everybody now is a target, and everybody, just because of the things they say, or the, even the mask they wear has become like this political sort of statement. And whether you wear it or don't wear it, or how you wear it, and there's like so much mask shaming in my neighborhood. Like people take pictures of you if you're not wearing your mask properly, and then they post it on next door. And there are all these wars about, shaming the people and naming and shaming the people who aren't wearing their masks correctly. I mean, it's just like it's just such an ugly time. Make it stop. Make it stop. Where I live, there's a clock outside, and it's how many good years the Earth has left, like how many inhabitable years we have left on this planet Earth, and it's 7 years. Because I guess the UN had some big report that said there are only 7 good years left on this planet. And so it ticks down the days, the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. So I know we only have 7 good years left. So knowing that and seeing that as a constant reminder when I walk outside, I'm like, okay, there are only 7 good years left. So I'm just thinking, like, let's try and think about life. If we're around in 8 years,
Right.
what that looks like.
Yeah.
Right? If that's a big if, more years, how that's going to look. Because I worry about that. I worry about, like, we're old now, Chris. Forget about us. It's about, it's the children that are being raised with this toxic, internet, that they don't know any different. They don't know anything different. So they just think like, it's us versus them, and we all hate each other, and we're all divided. And what do they know? What's their life going to look like? I don't even want to think about that. I feel so sorry for them. At least we're old. At least we get to die soon.
Well, my kids actually, oddly enough, my kids are in their 20s, and neither of them cares about social media. They don't care at all. It's somehow they just missed it as they were getting out of high school. Social media became big, and they were just like, this is dumb. I use social media more than they do, but I use it for work. I use it for film threat and projects I'm doing, but they don't care. They're not interested. But I do fear for people who grew up with social media and how they use social media as like, that's a real reflection. That digital persona that's put out there then becomes, manifested in their physical selves, where if something bad happens on the internet, it actually affects them physically. I believe that there is physical harm to your mental well-being in that space. I hope that you continue. American Selfie, I believe, is a project. It's not just one movie. I wish it was. I wanted, like I said, my biggest complaint, it should be more. And I love that I can hear your voice. I recognize your voice in the background as you're speaking to people. You don't really make yourself a center of it. You're not like Michael Moore, some other filmmakers. You're in it, but you've got some distance. And
but what's interesting about that is that if Michael Moore is like the highest grossing box office, you can't say anything ill of he who is holding documentaries on his shoulders. He's made some great movies and he's made us laugh, but that's what people want to see. People don't want to watch like the girl in the background being, he's like, I try to make these films where I try to step back and be very, I don't try and insert myself in my worldview, but that's how you get the asses in the seats. If you want to get people to go to the theater, if there is such a thing as a movie theater after 2020, who knows? But if you're trying to sell your merch, you got to take a side and you've got to own it. What happens when I put a movie out is that, the one side comes and shits all over it because it's, oh, she's a liberal. And then the liberals shit on it because they're like, oh, she's not taking on that. She's not challenging the Trump voters. Like, if you just take like a real, like, I'm just going to let people talk and hear what they have to say. There's no market for that. It's a very small market. Let's put it that way.
I have to thank you. There's a great moment in your doc, one of my favorite moments, where you have a bunch of Trump supporters and they're having a conversation with a Black gentleman, and it doesn't get too contentious. They reached some understanding, and I thought it was just like, why don't we see more of this? Why are all, I feel like only the bad news and the divisiveness is what's amplified. And you saw this moment, they hug at the end, not to ruin it, but they hug at the end. I know you got to run. You got a bunch of, you got to come back. You got to come back. Let's just have a conversation about documentaries. When you're not promoting a particular movie, always an open invitation at Film Thread. Just want to let you know.
Wow. So, I mean, that was worth making the movie alone just to get back
come on
your list. Wow.
You were always on the list.
I'm gonna write this in my diary tonight.
All right. But you don't need my help.
I'm gonna hold you to that.
Hold me to it. Hold me to it. Get I'm an easy guy to reach.
I'm gonna come find you. You're gonna regret you ever said that.
Okay. All right. Alexandra Pelosi, thank you so much. American Selfie is out now by the time you see this. I want to thank you. And I also want to thank our sponsor, Storyblocks. Go to storyblocks.com/filmthreat. You probably know what Storyblocks is because you used all documentary filmmakers use that company. So Alexandra, Thank you so much. Congrats on the movie. It really is. It's remarkable. And I love it. It's just great to talk to you.
Thank you. And congrats to you, man. You're still going strong. I'm proud of you. Looking good.
You know what?
Old, but looking good.
Yes. Well, I can't. If I could get a real job, I wouldn't have to do Film Threat. But thanks so much.